Hello and welcome to this podcast for anyone considering applying for the 9 Dots Prize. I'm Jane Tinkler, Senior Manager for the 9 Dots Prize, and we're keen to encourage entries from as wide a range of people as possible. In this episode, we'll be looking at why hearing from a diverse set of voices is important and how we can make sure everyone can contribute. But what about the question for this latest prize cycle? Is there still no place like home? We asked people what the word home means to them.
A place that I consider to be my own.
Well, where you live, relax, getting warm and all that, especially in a day like today.
Home is where I keep my toothbrush.
Where I just can go and forget about all the worries of this world.
Home is unconditional love.
So what does home mean to you? We're looking for as much variety in this year's entries as possible. Whoever you are and wherever you are in the world, we want to hear from you. Our only requirement is that your entry is written in English.
It matters to get voices from different groups, different societies, different age groups, different race, different class, different sexual identities. Our world is one of difference, and so it's important to get those voices to expand our horizon.
Most people who traditionally have the advantages which lead them into professions like writing or the arts or academia come from a very similar background, but you've got a bit of gold if you don't.
I think solutions to problems can come from anywhere and can sometimes come from the most surprising of places.
The words of 3 experts who are passionate about giving underrepresented communities and writers a voice.
My name is Bibi Bakare-Yusuf. I'm the co-founder and publishing director of Cassava Republic Press, which started in Nigeria about 12 years ago. And our remit is to publish writers from the African world. So it's really about expanding the narrative and the stories of writers of African descent. And one of the things we also do is to encourage new writers, in particular women especially, and voices that we often don't hear about. So we are really interested in encouraging multiplicity of voices from the widest possible spaces in Nigeria and across the continent and in the diaspora as well.
I'm Lee Hall. I'm a writer. I come from Newcastle, sort of from I'd say a very ordinary working class background, and write about class. That's the subject I write about most. The 2 works which I think mean more to people than most of the things I've written are Billy Elliot and the Pitman Painters. Billy Elliot's probably more well known, the kid who wants to be a ballet dancer from a mining background. And the other story is again set in a mining community. It's called the Pitman Painters, and it's about a group of miners. And in the 1930s, they took an education class to learn to paint. But the key for me was not about transcending class for either of those. It was that I passionately believe that everybody is creative in one way or another, but working class and art seem to be oxymoronic. These are 2 things that shouldn't go together. You have to be middle class to make art, and I think that that's clearly, in my view, stupid and erroneous.
I'm Lopa Patel. I'm a digital entrepreneur working in media, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Diversity UK, which is an equality and inclusion think tank, which looks at the issues and challenges faced by Britain's diverse communities. I came to the UK from Kenya in 1973. I was 9 years old. The racial element of it's quite interesting. A lot of people, when they first listened to me, would say to me, "Oh, well, yeah, but you don't strike me as being Asian." I don't know whether to take that politely or to be affronted by it.
Why then do diversity and inclusion matter for the 9 Dots Prize and for society more broadly?
I think the business benefits are already well researched and understood. Obviously, morally, diversity and inclusion is the right thing to do. It values the individual, it makes use of their experience and viewpoints, and it produces a fairer working environment. As far as the prize is concerned, you miss out on the rich tapestry of people's global experiences. Is often we imagine that all the solutions will come from the West, and I don't think that's the case.
I think one of the reasons why we're in such an absolute mess is because the culture that supports so many of the political, scientific, technocratic solutions to things has come from this extremely small set of experience. And it's a nice club where your prejudices are seen as universals and just common sense and accepted, and that those outside it have been convinced that they shouldn't be allowed in. And I was lucky enough to have people tell me that that was bollocks, and you've got every right to be there. But it is imperative that if you've got an inkling to say something, especially if you're not from the establishment or those classes that have got their hands on power and hands on cultural influence, it's imperative that we go in and say and give other perspectives.
Bibi Bakare-Yusuf feels that this year's prize question will have a particular resonance for writers from her part of the world.
I'm really hoping that we'll get a lot of applicants from different parts of Africa, because I think different parts of Africa would have conceptualized the question of home very differently. So, for example, Yorubas, we have a saying where we say, the world is our market, heaven is home. Especially at a period in human history where there's so much movement, like unprecedented movement, and Africans, because of the economic situation of the continent, they're forced to have to leave home, to have to take to the road or to the sea, and in the process, many are dying. And what motivates people to leave home, and what also makes them stay behind?
What then can be done to encourage potential writers from every background? Lee Hall draws on his own experiences.
When we were doing our O-levels, as they were then, I remember the teacher explaining that they'd got an exemption from the exam board not to do Shakespeare because none of us would understand it. And in a way, I think it was a really good thing, because we studied other things. We did The Lord of the Flies, I remember. I was very lucky in the 70s in Newcastle, because there was a movement to try and engage kids into drama. And really that's how I ended up pursuing literature and drama. And then, because I loved it, I ended up doing quite well in my exams and going to Cambridge. And then realising when I got to Cambridge that coming from this culture and having a completely different vantage to everybody else was a huge privilege in itself and a huge gift. And I think where it clicked, I thought you had to write about posh subjects and it had to be proper to be a proper writer. And then I realised, I should be writing about myself and the people I knew and the background I'm from, growing up in the Northeast during the miners' strike.
So the question is, what can we do to make sure that diverse voices can be heard? Well, the first thing is acknowledging that there is an issue. That's a really good stance. At Diversity UK, we ask everyone to do an internal audit of their organisation. Are you a diverse team? Are you a diverse organisation? And if not, what kind of diversity do you want to encourage? You might want more women in your organisation, but it isn't just about gender. It could be also about race. It could be about LGBTQ, which is lesbian, gay, transgender, etc. Or it could be about disability rights, or it could just be about different viewpoints.
The judges for the 9 Dots Prize won't know who the entrants are or their educational background or experience. Bibi, who's a 9 Dots board member and will be one of those judges, thinks that's important.
For me, one of the things I find really attractive about this prize is the fact that we're not going to know their names, where they're coming from. It's anonymous. It should encourage more writers from diverse backgrounds, and the reason being is that you then feel you have more of a chance. So we as judges, we are having to judge people's writing purely on the merit of their writing. And I think that's really exciting. It's a bit like online dating. You don't know whether until you meet the person, right? You don't know what size or shape or anything.
Here at the 9 Dots Prize, we're keen to encourage entrants who may not come from the obvious fields of academia or journalism, indeed people who may not have done much writing before but have brilliant ideas to discuss. What advice do our experts have for less experienced writers? Lopa Patel.
Setting a deadline helps. So you might say, well, by the end of the week, I want to have achieved a title, for example, for my piece. Then I think you need to write some bullet points and then break down your idea into constituent parts. So my strategy is often write a little but write often, and then come back to it the next day and write some more, and come back to it the next day and write some more. So break it down into smaller pieces so it's not such a huge sort of, insurmountable challenge. By this time, you've probably got a lot of words. You need to kind of add a little bit of structure. So my structure is always the summary in the opening paragraph. And then write subheadings to break it down and make sure that each paragraph under the subheading is substantial enough before you move on to the next point. And if you run out of ideas, then I would suggest doodling in the margins until you get some more ideas. But the key thing is to keep going, keep going.
Life happens to us. We're having children, we've got work, full-time jobs and activities to do. So you can just think every single day I'm going to take half an hour out of my day to carve out a time to just write. That might be first thing in the morning before you do anything, and just get a notepad next to your bed, write your morning page. And then when you have a free moment, you can then start typing it up and you'll begin to see how it takes shape. And if you have a recorder, a telephone, maybe you might just record yourself, your thought process, just have a conversation with yourself. But you have to remember that writing is a practice. It's a muscle in your brain, in your fingers that you have to exercise all the time. And the only way you can exercise it is by doing. If you don't go to the gym every single day or every 3 or 4 days, your muscles will seize up. The same thing with writing.
I think that the main thing that I'd say to people who haven't done a lot of writing is you've got to do the bleeding obvious. And most people who start writing who haven't done it before are trying to be clever, are trying to sound like what they think a proper writer is. The key is to try and think, what is the most simple way I can express my point of view? Because your point of view is probably quite complicated. So the most important thing to make it resonant is to try and streamline it. And then, which every writer will tell you, it's 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration, but it's 90% editing. You don't have to get it right all in one go. You can go back as many times as you want. I was a year late handing in Billy Elliot from what I promised the producers, and I just thought, I'll never work again. I'll not entertain a writer who takes so long. It took a year extra to write it, but, well, it's 25 years on since I delivered that thing, and they're doing it all over the world. It didn't matter at all.
That may have worked for Lee Hall, but don't forget that our deadline is definitely the 21st of January 2019. So what do you think? Are you going to enter? The winner will get $100,000, a book contract with Cambridge University Press, and a chance to spend some time at Crash at the University of Cambridge. We hope this podcast has inspired everyone listening to consider taking part in the prize. Many thanks to Bibi Bakare-Yusuf, Lee Hall and Lopa Patel. And what final words from them to encourage you if you're still hesitating?
So if you are from Black, Asian or minority ethnic community and you're looking at the 9 Dots Prize and you really want to enter, but you're not sure, I think what I would say to you is marshal all your thoughts. And I think the key thing is to build up your confidence, because your experience is actually going to be very critical to the entry that you make, and it might be the winning entry. I would really encourage you to kind of think in very simple terms about what it is that you're trying to solve, and encourage you to build confidence in yourself to make an application to the 9 Dots Prize.
There's a phrase in Newcastle, which I'm sure is probably universal. Shy bairns getting out. In the Northeast, a bairn is a child. And so if you're shy and don't ask or don't take part, you won't get anything. You'll get out. Give it a go. Give it a go. Because you're bound to think, if you're not from a privileged background, and that's privileged in any way, that what you say is not going to be as important or as legitimate or as polished or as worthy as somebody who has had some advantages. But it's possibly precisely because you haven't got all of that polish and stuff that your work might stand out.
I would really encourage people who might feel a prize like this is not for me because look at the prize, it's $100,000. Who's going to want to read the kind of stuff I've got to write? I would say, who wouldn't? Please write because your voice is important. It's necessary that we hear from all kinds of voices and from all kinds of people writing about all kinds of different issues. If not you, who else?
Thanks for listening. You can find more details about the prize or apply at www.9dotsprize.org. Good luck!